Okay, so have you ever when you're trying to explain something and you can't think of the right word.
Right.
It's like, I want to say more than good,
Yeah.
I want to really capture how awesome this thing is, but good is all that's coming out.
For sure. For sure.
So I think that happens to all of us, right?
Totally. I think that's something we can all relate to.
So today we're going to look at how to really level up our vocabulary.
Okay.
And we're going to be using this lesson that was designed to help people learning English.
Cool.
But this is for anyone who wants to sound more interesting or who wants to write in a more compelling way.
Yeah.
So I think we can all benefit from this.
Definitely. I mean, who wouldn't want to expand their vocabulary and express themselves more effectively, right?
Exactly. So it's not about becoming a walking thesaurus or anything like that.
No, not at all.
It's more about finding those perfect words to really elevate our communication.
Exactly. It's about moving beyond just those basic labels and really getting to the heart of what makes something special or interesting or, even controversial.
Right. And what are some of the mistakes you see people making when they're trying to use more advanced vocabulary?
Well, I think a common one is reaching for the most complex word they can find, thinking it'll make them sound smarter.
Oh, yeah.
But that often backfires.
Uh-huh.
The real skill is in choosing words that fit the context and convey the specific nuance you're going for.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
So this source we're looking at, they talk about the word good.
Okay.
And how you could say remarkable or exceptional or outstanding.
Right.
But you wouldn't want to say oh, my lunch with my friend was outstanding.
Exactly. Outstanding implies something that really stands out from the crowd.
Yeah.
While remarkable might be a better fit for something that's, simply worth noting.
Okay, so it's about choosing the right word for the situation.
Precisely. It's like having a toolbox full of different tools and knowing which one to use for each specific task.
Yeah, so it's more than just grabbing the biggest word.
Exactly.
It's about being thoughtful about it.
Exactly. Thoughtfulness and precision. Yep. Those are key.
So this lesson also has some exercises to help us internalize these new words.
Yes, it does. It offers several practical ways to really practice and integrate these words into your everyday language.
What are some of those?
Well, there's the classic fill in the blanks.
Okay.
Where you replace basic words with more interesting alternatives.
Gotcha.
So instead of saying he had a good idea,
right,
you could say he had a brilliant idea.
Okay. And that just makes it
exactly
more vivid.
Yes, exactly. Brilliant conveys a sense of ingenuity and originality that good just doesn't capture.
Right. So you're not just finding a longer word.
Right.
You're actually finding a more fitting word.
Exactly.
And that's really cool.
Yeah.
And it also has you rewrite sentences to use those new words.
Yes, that's another great exercise. It challenges you to think about how these words function in different contexts.
And I thought it was really cool they included this short story that was written first with basic words.
Right.
And then with more advanced vocabulary.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting to see the difference.
It really highlights the impact of word choice, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. So this first sentence says, "The old house stood on a hill overlooking the town. It was a beautiful day and the sun was shining brightly."
Okay.
But then when they jazz it up with better words, they say, "The ancient manor perched atop the hill, casting a watchful gaze over the bustling town below. The day shimmered with an ethereal beauty, the sun's rays painting the landscape in hues of gold."
Wow, that's quite a transformation.
It is, right.
The second version is so much more evocative and immersive.
Yeah, and I just love how they did that.
It's amazing what a few well-chosen words can do.
Yeah, ancient manor is so much better than old house.
Absolutely. It conjures up images of history and grandeur.
Yeah, and you can just picture it.
Exactly. You can practically feel the weight of the centuries in that phrase.
Yeah, and then it says, "The day shimmered with an ethereal beauty," instead of just beautiful day.
Yes. It's like the words themselves are painting a picture.
Right. And that's what I'm always trying to do.
Of course.
But I'm how do I do that?
Right.
So this is really cool.
It's a great example of how vocabulary can elevate your writing.
So this is cool for writing, but what about just talking or sending an email or something?
That's where context comes in.
Okay.
You wouldn't use the same language in a professional email as you would in a casual conversation with friends.
So we don't want to sound like Shakespeare all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about being aware of your audience and the situation.
So we've seen that choosing the right word can make a big impact.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we actually learn all these new words?
Well, luckily, this lesson provides some fantastic tips for expanding your vocabulary, and I think they'll be really helpful for our listeners.
Yeah, let's hear them.
Okay, let's dive in. So the first tip is to read a lot.
Okay.
But they say don't just read.
Uh,
Like when you see a word you don't know,
yeah.
write it down or highlight it.
Okay, yeah, because I feel like I read stuff all the time.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, that's an interesting word.
Yeah.
But then I just keep reading.
Exactly, and it just goes in one ear and out the other.
Totally.
But when you actually take the time to write it down or highlight it,
Yeah,
you're forced to really think about it.
right. And then maybe even look it up.
Exactly. And that makes a big difference in terms of actually remembering the word.
It's like taking notes in class.
Yeah, it's like active learning versus passive learning.
So what's the next tip?
Okay, so this one's interesting. They say to use a synonym finder,
Okay.
but not just for single words,
Uh-huh.
but for whole phrases.
What do you mean?
So let's say you're writing and you say, I had a really good time at the party.
Okay.
Instead of just looking up a synonym for good, you could plug that whole phrase into a synonym finder,
Right.
and you might find something like, I had a blast at the party.
Ooh, that's good.
Or, the party was an absolute delight.
It just sounds more.
Exactly. It adds more flavor and personality to your writing.
So it's like you're not just swapping out one word.
Right.
You're finding a better way to say the whole thing.
Exactly. And it can really help you break out of those writing ruts we all fall into.
Okay, that's really cool.
Yeah.
And then they say to actually use the new words.
Yes. Practice is key.
Okay, but
Yeah.
I feel like if I try to use a word I just learned, it'll sound weird.
Well, it might feel a little awkward at first,
Yeah.
but the more you use it,
Uh-huh.
the more natural it will become.
So just try to work it into conversations.
Exactly. You can also try writing practice sentences or even using it in your journal.
Okay, so just find ways to use it.
Exactly.
Okay.
So another tip is to immerse yourself in the language.
Okay, so
Yeah.
watch movies and stuff.
Yes. Watch movies, TV shows, listen to podcasts.
But we talked about how just passively watching something
Right.
doesn't really help.
Exactly. You need to be an active listener.
Okay, how do you do that?
Pay attention to how native speakers use language.
Okay.
What words do they choose? How do they express their emotions?
Yeah.
Really listen to the nuances of their speech.
So it's I'm trying to learn something.
Exactly. Be a student of the language.
Oh, way?
And don't be afraid to pause and rewind if you hear a word or phrase you don't understand.
Gotcha. So I'm not just vegging out.
Right.
I'm actually paying attention.
Exactly. You're turning entertainment into a learning opportunity.
I like that. And what's the last tip?
Okay, so the last one is all about review and revision.
Ooh, that's where I struggle.
Yeah, it's easy to learn new words and then forget them.
Totally.
So it's important to create a system for reviewing the words you've learned.
Okay, so flashcards or something?
Exactly. Flashcards are great. You can also create your own vocabulary list and quiz yourself regularly.
Okay, and just make sure I'm using the words.
Exactly. The more you use them,
Yeah.
the more likely you are to remember them.
This is really about building good habits.
Exactly. Consistency is key when it comes to vocabulary growth.
I like that.
Um,
And what about finding people to talk to?
Yes, that's a great idea.
Maybe a book club or something.
Absolutely. Surrounding yourself with people who share your love of language can be incredibly motivating.
And then they can correct me if I use a word wrong.
Exactly. It's a supportive environment where you can practice and learn from each other.
I like that. So we're building our own language toolbox?
Yes, exactly. And the more tools we have, the better equipped we are to communicate effectively.
I love that. And I'm curious, have you ever come across a word or phrase that just blew your mind?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there have been so many, but one that really sticks out is from The Great Gatsby.
Okay.
Fitzgerald's use of language in that book is just so exquisite.
Oh, I love that book.
It's a masterpiece, and his descriptions are so vivid and evocative.
Yeah, you can just feel the longing and the glamour.
Exactly. It's like you're transported right into that world.
Yeah, it makes you realize how powerful words can be.
Absolutely. Words have the power to move us, to inspire us, to change us.
And we can all do that.
Exactly. We can all use language to create beauty and meaning in the world.
So for our listeners who are ready to level up their vocabulary,
Yeah.
what's the one thing they should keep in mind?
I would say embrace curiosity.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to experiment with language.
Yeah.
Have fun with it.
Mm-hmm.
And most importantly, don't be afraid to make mistakes.
That's good advice. I make mistakes all the time.
We all do. It's part of the learning process.
So it's okay to like sound silly sometimes.
Exactly. Just keep practicing and you'll get more confident over time.
Well, this has been so much fun.
It has been a pleasure chatting with you.
I feel like I've learned so much.
Me too. It's always a joy to talk about language.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this vocabulary adventure.
Keep learning, keep exploring, and keep playing with words.
And we'll see you next time for another deep dive. All right, let's unlock a superpower everybody uses every day. I mean, who doesn't use language?
You got that right.
And specifically today, we're diving deep into the everyday kind of language, the words and phrases we use to describe our daily routines, like getting ready for work or school, that kind of thing.
It's really interesting how much we kind of give ourselves away just by the way we talk about even something as simple as brushing our teeth.
Right. And the source material that we're looking at today really gets that. It breaks down this daily routine vocabulary by different skill levels, from beginner to advanced, but it goes way deeper than that. It like shows how the words we choose actually reflect our mindset and even where we're at with our fluency, right?
Exactly. Just think about it for a second. Like someone who's just starting out learning English might say, I eat breakfast.
Yeah.
But as they get more comfortable, more fluent, that might change to, I whip up a quick breakfast before hitting the gym.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same action, but the language is so much more vivid and really tells a story.
And that's what really struck me too, like the way this source material organizes everything around morning, afternoon, and evening routines. It's like a roadmap of how our language actually changes throughout the day,
Such a good point. Yeah, it's so smart. I mean, for example, eat lunch is pretty basic, but if you bump that up to network over lunch, that brings a whole different level of intentionality to the table.
It does. It really does. Like the words themselves are like clues about how we approach different parts of our day.
Oh, sure.
So let's get started with those morning routines, right?
Yeah.
What are some of the shifts we see in the language? We go from like a beginner level all the way up to, a more advanced level.
Well, I think when you're starting out, when you're at the beginner level, it's all about just those really essential verbs, right?
Yeah.
Things like wake up, get dressed, have breakfast, those sorts of things. I mean, it's functional, gets the message across, but doesn't really tell us much about the person or their experience, right?
Totally. It's just like the bare minimum. It's like you're filling out a form at the doctor's office.
Exactly.
But then when we get to the intermediate level, that's where we start to see a little more personality come through. Right?
For sure.
Instead of brush teeth, maybe it's brush teeth for 2 minutes or use whitening toothpaste. All of a sudden we get some detail.
Exactly. And those little additions can reveal a lot about somebody, right? About their priorities, their habits. Are they really all about efficiency or are they kind of more detail oriented? The language really gives us clues.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay, but now we're getting to the part that I got really excited about, like the advanced vocabulary. We start to see phrases like start the day on the right foot, or even recharge with a mindful morning routine. Now it's not just about what you're doing, but the feeling behind it, the intention. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And recharge is such a powerful word to use here because it really suggests that a morning routine isn't just a list of tasks to get through, but it's a way to renew your energy, It's a source of energy.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
And, digging a little deeper here, like start the day on the right foot. Yeah. It's not just some random saying.
Yeah, it's interesting.
That actually has roots going all the way back to ancient Roman superstition.
Really?
Stepping out with your right foot first was good luck back then.
Wow. That's so cool. See, even simple phrases, they can have these amazing historical and cultural layers,
It makes you wonder if those ancient Romans, did they have their own version of like a power breakfast or something like that?
Probably. Maybe. Yeah. It's so interesting to think about how language has evolved and adapted over time.
But some core concepts, some things just never change, right?
That's true.
Like the desire for a good start to your day, that's a universal thing, know?
Absolutely. That's something really important to keep in mind as we go through all these routines. It's not just about the individual, but how the words reflect, broader cultural values.
That's a good question. Now I want to analyze everything I say.
Right. Me too.
Okay. Before we go totally meta here, let's move on to the afternoon routines. What kind of linguistic gems are waiting for us there?
Well, it's interesting to see how the focus shifts as the day goes on, right?
Yeah.
So in the morning, it's all about getting ready, getting energized. And then in the afternoon, the language starts to reflect how we interact with the world, especially in work or professional settings.
Right. It's like we go from eat lunch to grab a quick bite, to, like you said, network during lunch.
Exactly. And it's like the pace picks up, the stakes get higher.
Yeah.
You know?
It's almost like a video game or something.
Yeah,
You know?
is it?
Level up.
That's a great analogy because it shows how our language has to adapt to our changing roles, the different contexts we find ourselves in.
It does.
Even eating is different. It becomes more strategic.
Totally. You're not just eating to live, you're eating to win. But, there's also this interesting thread of recharging that kind of runs through all the afternoon routines.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like phrases such as take a power nap or recharge with a walk. So we know it's important to keep that energy going.
Yeah, absolutely.
It suggests that we need these intentional breaks.
Right.
It's not just about pushing through,
Right.
You got to take a break. You know what I mean?
I think about my own afternoons and how often I say I'm going to power through this afternoon slump.
Yeah.
But what I really need is to recharge.
It's like there's this tension between what we feel like we should be doing and then what we actually need to do to thrive.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
And the language helps us kind of figure that out.
Yeah.
I'm curious, when you think about your afternoon routine, what are some of the phrases that come to mind?
Well, I definitely catch myself saying catch up on emails way more than I should. I wish I could get rid of that one. But I also try to say, find my flow when I'm working on a project,
Yeah.
It's like acknowledging that productivity isn't always linear. Sometimes you have to find it.
That's a good one. Find my flow. I like that. So that kind of brings us to a crucial question here. How do these afternoon routines, how do they set us up for a successful evening?
That's a really good question. And actually, I'm already noticing some interesting connections between the way we talk about recharging in the afternoon and the way we describe how we wind down in the evening,
Right.
It's almost like a mirror image. In the afternoon, we're trying to keep that energy up, but then in the evening, it's all about how to restore it. The language totally reflects that shift.
Okay, so let's get into those evening routines. How does the language evolve as we get closer to bedtime? And what does that tell us about what really matters to us, our priorities and mindsets?
Well, like we saw before, at the beginner level, it's all about those familiar actions. Have dinner, watch TV, go to bed. It's all really simple and straightforward, and it's all about our basic needs, right?
Totally. It's like hitting the reset button after a long day.
Yeah.
But when we move up to the intermediate level, things start to get a little more intentional.
Yeah.
We see phrases like spend time with family or read a book or even practice a hobby.
Yeah, that's a really cool shift. It's like now there's this awareness of nurturing our relationships and spending time doing things that bring us joy and pursuing our passions.
Right.
It's about creating a more balanced, fulfilling life.
Yeah, so I bet those advanced speakers, they take that even further, right? What kind of language do we see when people are really intentional with those evening routines?
Yeah, you're totally right. Instead of just saying watching TV, you might hear something like disconnect from screens or engage in mindful relaxation.
Yeah.
And instead of just going to bed, it's prepare for a restful sleep. It's taking those basic actions to a whole new level.
I love that.
Yeah.
Like the language is guiding us to this more intentional and mindful way of ending our day.
Exactly. And that brings us to a really interesting question. How does the language we use to describe our evening routines, how does that affect how we sleep and even our overall well-being?
That is a good question. It's something I'm going to be thinking about a lot, I think, as we go through this deep dive. But for now, let's take a closer look at those advanced phrases for our evening routines, because I am so intrigued by that contrast between disconnect from screens and engage in mindful relaxation. What do you think the difference is there? Like, what's the significance of those two things?
Yeah, it's such a subtle but powerful shift. I think the disconnect from screens is kind of acknowledging that technology can really mess with our sleep. It overstimulates us.
Right.
And it's like saying that rest is more important. We need to create boundaries,
Yeah.
And then engage in mindful relaxation takes it even further. You're not just avoiding things. You're creating a sense of calm. You're being present. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that shows a deeper understanding of the connection between our mind and body.
It's funny. I'm feeling more relaxed just thinking about these phrases right now.
I know, me too. It's crazy how much of an impact language has on us,
Totally.
It reminds us that even little changes in the words we use can make a huge difference.
This is making me rethink how I talk about my own evening routine, for sure.
Yeah.
But before we go down that road, let's give our listeners a chance to think about this,
Yeah, let's take a breath here. Think about your own evenings, right? what are some of the phrases you use to talk about how you wind down, Do you find yourself using those words that are more mindful, more intentional, or are you more focused on just checking things off your to-do list?
That's a really interesting thing to think about because, sometimes the words we use, they reveal more about us than we think. That's what's so cool about this deep dive into this vocabulary. It's not just about learning new words. It's about understanding ourselves and how we navigate the world, right?
Exactly. It's really amazing how much our language changes as we become more fluent,
Yeah, totally. It's like leveling up in a video game or something.
Right.
Instead of getting new armor, you're getting new ways to express yourself.
Exactly. And it's not just about sounding fancier or something.
Right. It's not about trying to impress people.
Yeah, it's about, being able to really get your thoughts and feelings across with more, more nuance.
Yeah.
More precision.
For sure. And that's something I noticed in this source material too.
Right.
Like even the simplest, most everyday actions, we could describe them in totally different ways depending on how fluent we are.
Yeah, it's true.
Remember how we were talking about eating lunch before? It's like at the beginner level, it's just eat lunch. You're just hungry.
Yeah.
But when you get more fluent, it becomes grabbing a quick bite or even networking during lunch.
And that shift going from eating to networking is so interesting.
I know, right?
Because it shows how much more we understand about like social dynamics and professional etiquette, all that stuff. It's just built right into the language.
Yeah. Right. You're not just refueling your body, you're refueling your connections, your career,
Yeah.
And it's not just about work either.
Right.
Even something like cleaning the dishes can change as we get more fluent.
Oh, for sure. Instead of just cleaning, you might say tidying up or organizing the kitchen, it becomes about more than just chores,
Right. It's like you're not just doing chores, you're creating a space for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Speaking of creating a space, I'm really interested in how this source material focuses on self-care.
Oh, yeah, me too. I thought that was so interesting.
It's there throughout all three routines, but I feel like it gets more intentional, I guess, as the skill level increases.
Yeah, it's woven into the language, for sure.
Yeah, like, instead of just watching TV in the evening, it's reading a book or taking a relaxing bath.
Yeah.
It's all about recognizing that me time is important.
Absolutely. And I think, as you get to that more advanced level, that's when the self-care becomes even more obvious,
Right? Like people are really starting to own it at that point.
Yeah, totally. You see phrases like practice mindfulness or even engage in self-reflection or prioritize sleep. These things take effort and they're not always easy,
Yeah.
But the language is almost like it's giving us permission to slow down, to take care of ourselves.
I love that.
I think it's a message that a lot of people need to hear these days.
Especially these days, right? Everybody's so busy and, we forget about taking care of ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. It's so easy to get caught up in everything and forget about what we really need.
So as we're talking about self-care, it made me think about that word recharging that we kept seeing earlier.
Oh, yeah. Good point.
It was in all three routines, the morning, the afternoon, and the evening. But it had slightly different meanings each time.
It's true.
In the morning, it was like recharging with a cup of coffee.
Yeah, to get ready for the day.
Right, exactly. In the afternoon, it's recharging with a walk or something like that. And then in the evening, it's about disconnecting from screens or engaging in a relaxing activity. It's the same word, but it has all these different applications,
Yeah, it's fascinating. It shows how even though we all need to recharge, we do it in different ways, right? We all have our own ways of doing it.
I wonder if our listeners have thought about their own recharging routine.
Me too. Yeah. Like, what are those moments for them?
Yeah, and how do they describe them, right?
Yeah.
Because even if we don't realize it, the way we talk about those routines, I think it tells us a lot about, what we value, what we prioritize.
It really does. It's like a window into, how we see ourselves, how we see the world.
Speaking of how we see ourselves, I'm curious to hear what our listeners think about this whole connection between language and mindset.
Me too. It's such a fascinating idea, right?
I mean, we've been talking about how our vocabulary can show where we're at with our fluency, how we approach self-care. I wonder if our listeners have noticed other patterns in their own language.
I know, right? Like, are there certain words they use that really reflect who they are or what their goals are, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, or how their language has changed as they've gotten older. Maybe their perspective on things has changed,
Yeah, definitely.
It's such a cool thing to think about because language is so much more than just a way to, pass along information.
Right. It's not just about, getting the message across. It's how we express ourselves.
It's a way to show our identity. you know?
Yeah, totally.
It really shapes how we see ourselves in the world around us, you know?
It really does.
Which kind of brings up a really big question here. If language has the power to shape our perceptions, can we use it to create the experiences we want? Can we actually, like, make things happen with the words we choose?
Whoa. That's a big question. That makes me think about all those like really intentional phrases we talked about, like setting intentions, or even visualizing success.
Cultivating gratitude.
Right.
Those are all about shaping our thoughts and feelings with words.
Exactly. It's like using words as tools to create a more positive mindset.
Right. It's all about that inner voice.
Yeah, exactly.
And if we can train that voice to be more encouraging, to be more positive, that's got to have an impact on our actions, right?
For sure. It's like we're programming our minds for success just by choosing the right words,
Totally. It makes me think about this quote I read once. The words you speak become the house you live in. It's so true.
Oh, I love that. It really shows how much power our words have,
And it makes me wonder how our listeners are using their words, right? Are they being intentional or are they just letting things happen,
Yeah, like are they choosing words that support their goals and their values?
Right.
Or are they kind of letting those negative thoughts take over?
Yeah.
It's something we all need to be mindful of, right?
Totally, because language is such a powerful tool. It can really help us change our lives for the better,
Absolutely.
And as we go through this deep dive, I'm excited to see what else we can learn about how language connects to our everyday lives. Going through all these different phrases about our routines, I've noticed something kind of interesting.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
It's like a shift from focusing on just tasks to focusing on experiences.
You're right. I see that.
Yeah, like at the beginner level, everything's very task-oriented,
Yeah.
make the bed, eat dinner, go to sleep.
Right, like checking things off a list, just getting it done.
Exactly. But then we get to the advanced level, the language gets, more sophisticated, more about enjoying the process.
I like that, enjoying the process.
Instead of just having dinner, it's like enjoying a home-cooked meal or sharing a meal with loved ones. There's more feeling there, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. It's like we're appreciating the experience more.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just about food either.
Right.
Like even work-related phrases, they change in the same way. At the beginner level, you might say work on a project. But at the advanced level, you're collaborating with colleagues or contributing your expertise.
Yeah, it's about finding meaning in what you're doing, not just getting it done.
And that makes me think about another really cool thing we've seen throughout all of this, mindfulness.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
It pops up in all three routines, but it's really strong in that advanced vocabulary.
For sure.
We see things like take a mindful walk, practice gratitude, even engage in deep breathing exercises. It's like the words themselves are trying to get us to be more present, more intentional.
It's about slowing down, being in the moment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing to think about how much power our words actually have.
It really is,
I mean, they can change how we think, how we feel, even what we do. So as we wrap up this deep dive into all this routine vocabulary, I want to leave our listeners with one last thought.
Okay, I'm listening.
Pay attention to the words you use.
That's good advice.
Yeah. Pay attention to how you talk about your routines,
Because it matters.
It really does, because those words, they're more than just descriptions.
They're like a reflection of who we are.
Exactly. They show our mindset, what we think is important, our whole approach to life.
So what you're saying is if we choose our words carefully,
Yeah.
we can change our lives.
I think so. Yeah. I think we can actually create the experiences we want just by being mindful of the words we use.
That's powerful.
It is. So to all our listeners out there, go out and write your own story,
I love that. Write your own story.
Choose your words wisely.
Yay!
Ever get that feeling you might be using a word wrong, but you're too afraid to ask?
Oh, yeah.
Well, fear no more. Because today we're diving deep into 15 words that even fluent English speakers mess up. We've got a YouTube script here all about leveling up your vocabulary. And you might be surprised by some of these common mistakes.
It is fascinating, though, how some of these errors stem from subtle distinctions that are easy to miss in casual conversation.
Okay, let's unpack this. We'll start with some beginner traps. Words that seem straightforward, but can be surprisingly tricky. I'll be honest, the word literally is one I hear misused all the time.
Yep.
Just the other day, someone told me they were literally dying from how much they had to do that week.
Yes. Literally seems to be a word that's been taken hostage by hyperbole.
So remind us, what should literally mean? Why is it important to use it correctly?
Literally means something actually happened, exactly as stated.
Yeah.
It emphasizes the reality of a situation, not an exaggeration.
Right.
While your friend might have felt overwhelmed, they weren't literally dying.
Right.
You see, using literally correctly makes sure your words carry their intended weight. It's about precision and clarity, especially in an age where misinformation can spread so easily.
That's a really good point. The impact on communication is huge. Okay, another beginner word that trips people up is unique. I once saw a store advertising a sale on very unique items. Something about that just felt off.
That's because unique means one of a kind.
Right.
Inherently special. It stands alone.
Right.
So adding modifiers like very or quite is redundant and actually weakens the impact of the word.
So instead of saying something is very unique, how can we highlight that specialness in everyday conversation?
Let the word unique speak for itself.
Okay.
You could say that painting is truly unique or her style is unique. You're emphasizing the inherent specialness without needing to qualify it further.
That's so interesting. I can see how that subtle shift makes a big difference. Even these beginner words have hidden depths. You really have to think about their true meaning.
Absolutely, and that's what makes language so fascinating. Now, prepare to have some assumptions challenged because some words have meanings completely different from what most people assume.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Give me an example of one of these words.
Let's start with irony.
Okay.
Many people confuse irony with simple coincidence or bad luck. For example, someone might say, "It's so ironic that I won the lottery and then got hit by a car."
So winning the lottery and then getting hit by a car, that's just bad luck, not irony.
Yeah.
What makes a situation truly ironic?
True irony involves a situation where the outcome is the opposite of what was expected, often with a humorous or sarcastic undertone. A classic example would be a fire station burning down. It's not just about unfortunate timing, it's about a surprising reversal of expectations.
Wow, that makes so much sense. It's not just about something bad happening. It's about the unexpected nature of the situation.
You see, understanding irony helps us analyze situations more deeply. It's not just about bad luck. It's about recognizing the unexpected and sometimes absurd nature of life.
Speaking of unexpected twists,
Yeah.
let's talk about a word. Often misused in situations with high stakes. Alibis. I feel like I hear people using alibi as a synonym for any kind of excuse.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I have a good alibi.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a common mistake. People might say, "I didn't finish the project, but I have a good alibi."
Wait, so if it's not just any excuse, what makes a real alibi? I'm genuinely confused.
An alibi has a very specific legal meaning.
Okay.
It refers to proof that someone was somewhere else at the time a crime was committed, demonstrating their innocence. It's not just any excuse. It's evidence that clears someone of suspicion.
So using alibi to explain why you didn't finish a project wouldn't really make sense.
Exactly. Using alibi in casual conversation when you simply mean excuse can actually undermine your credibility. It shows a lack of precision in your language.
Okay, this is making me rethink how I use these words. What other intermediate words are lurking out there, ready to trip us up?
How about a word that's often confused with its near opposite? Disinterested. Many people use disinterested to mean uninterested or bored. For instance, someone might say, "I was completely disinterested in that meeting."
Disinterested. If it doesn't mean bored or uninterested, then what does it actually mean?
Disinterested actually describes someone who is impartial or unbiased, free from personal stake or interest in a situation. A good example would be a judge who must remain disinterested in the outcome of a case.
Okay.
They can't be swayed by personal opinions or biases.
So if I wanted to say that I found the meeting boring, disinterested wouldn't be the right word to use.
Precisely. In that case, uninterested or bored would be more accurate.
Right.
Disinterested implies neutrality and objectivity. It's about being impartial, not uncaring.
I never realized how a single word could completely change the tone and meaning of a sentence. It's all about understanding those subtle but powerful nuances.
Absolutely. And that's what we're here to explore. Are you ready to be bemused by the next word?
Bemused. Okay, you've definitely got my attention. What's so tricky about this one?
People often think bemused means amused or entertained.
Okay.
You might hear someone say, "I was bemused by his silly jokes."
So if bemused doesn't mean amused, then what's the real meaning?
Bemused actually means puzzled, bewildered, or even slightly confused. Think of it as a state of mild perplexity, for example. You might be bemused by a riddle you can't solve.
Huh?
Or a strange event you don't fully understand.
So it's not about laughing at a joke. It's about that feeling of, wait, what just happened?
Mm-hmm.
That makes a lot of sense.
Imagine someone watching a magic trick.
Right.
Their brow furrowed, a slight smile playing on their lips.
Yeah.
That's bemusement. It's not amusement,
Yeah.
but a fascinated perplexity.
Okay, now I'm really starting to understand the difference.
Uh-huh.
Bemused is a much richer word than I realized.
Mm-hmm.
It's about that space between amusement and confusion.
Exactly. And these subtle distinctions can make a big difference in how your message is received. Are you ready for our final intermediate word?
Bring it on. I'm ready to tackle anything.
All right. Let's explore a word that's often misused to describe something grand or impressive. Enormity. People often use enormity to emphasize the sheer size or scope of something.
Uh-huh.
You might hear someone say, I was overwhelmed by the enormity of the project.
That's how I usually use it.
Mhm.
But I have a feeling it doesn't quite mean what I think it means.
Yeah.
What's the real meaning?
While enormity can relate to size, its primary meaning leans towards something more serious and weighty.
Okay.
It often refers to extreme wickedness, outrageousness, or the sheer gravity of a situation,
Right.
particularly in a moral or ethical context.
So it's less about physical size and more about the weight of the implications.
Precisely.
Mm.
For instance, if you were discussing a horrific crime, you might speak of the enormity of the act to emphasize its moral depravity and the severity of its consequences.
Wow, that puts the word in a whole new light. It's not just about something being big, it's about something being profoundly impactful, often in a negative sense.
Exactly. It's a word that carries a lot of weight, both literally and figuratively.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground already. And I'm starting to feel the enormity and the true sense of the word, of all these linguistic nuances. What's next on our journey?
Next, we'll be venturing into the realm of advanced words, where the nuances become even more intricate. Are you ready to level up your vocabulary even further?
Absolutely. I'm eager to see what other linguistic gems await us in this deep dive
Yeah.
into words.
Right.
It'd be great.
Awesome. Fasten your seatbelts, because these advanced words can be real brain twisters. They're the ones that often pop up in intellectual discussions or professional settings, and misusing them can unfortunately make you sound less credible.
Okay, I'm ready to face the advanced word challenge head on. Let's start with one that I've definitely struggled with in the past.
Decimate.
Decimate is fascinating because its common usage has drifted quite far from its original meaning. People often use it as a synonym for completely destroy, like saying the hurricane decimated the coastal towns. Yeah, I've definitely heard it used that way. But if it doesn't mean to completely destroy, then what does it actually mean?
Decimate has a very specific historical root. It comes from the ancient Roman practice of punishing mutinous troops by killing 1 out of every 10 soldiers. So the original meaning of decimate is to reduce by 1/10, not to obliterate completely.
Wow, I had no idea. That's a pretty grim origin story for a word. So using decimate to describe the total destruction of a town wouldn't be quite right.
Exactly. It's a case of hyperbole overtaking precision. While the impact of a hurricane can be devastating, it's unlikely to literally reduce a town's population by exactly 1/10.
This is why I love these deep dives. You uncover these hidden layers of meaning that we often miss in everyday conversation. It's like learning a secret code.
This word's bloody history reminds us that language carries the weight of the past. Even today, decimate suggests a severe calculated reduction, not total destruction.
Okay, what other advanced words are waiting to be decoded?
Let's tackle one that often gets misused in academic circles: peruse.
Peruse. I'll admit I've been guilty of using this one incorrectly myself. I always thought it meant to quickly skim through something.
That's a very common misconception. In reality, peruse means to read thoroughly and carefully. It implies a close and attentive examination of a text, not a hasty glance.
So if I said I perused the report before the meeting, it would mean I'd given it a very close read, not just skim the headings.
Precisely. Using peruse correctly conveys a sense of diligence and attention to detail. It suggests you've really absorbed the information.
This is another one of those aha moments. I'm realizing that using these advanced words correctly can signal a certain level of intellectual rigor. It shows you're not just skimming the surface.
Exactly. It's about choosing words that accurately reflect the depth of your engagement with the topic.
All right, bring on the next advanced word challenge. I'm feeling more and more confident with each one we tackle.
Let's see if you can crack the code on this one. Nonplussed.
Nonplussed. This one seems tricky. I've heard it used to describe someone who's calm and collected under pressure. Like, even though the presentation went wrong, she remained nonplussed.
That's a clever guess, but it's actually the opposite. Nonplussed describes a state of being surprised and confused, often to the point of speechlessness. It's that feeling of being caught off guard and unsure how to react.
Wow, so it's almost like being speechless with shock.
Exactly. Nonplussed implies a momentary loss of composure, a sense of being bewildered. It's that deer in the headlights feeling.
That makes so much more sense. I can see how misusing this word could lead to some awkward situations.
Indeed, it highlights the importance of understanding the nuances of these advanced words. They can have a big impact on how our message is perceived.
Okay, what other advanced word adventures await us? I'm ready to expand my vocabulary horizons.
Let's explore a word that often gets used in a way that diminishes its true impact. Plethora.
Plethora.
I usually think of this word as meaning a lot of something in a positive way, like there was a plethora of fun activities to choose from at the festival. That's a common interpretation. But plethora carries a slightly different nuance. While it does mean an abundance of something, it often implies an excessive or overwhelming amount.
Okay.
It can sometimes even suggest a sense of burden or inconvenience.
Interesting. So it's not just about having a lot of something, it's about having maybe too much of it, like it's overflowing.
Precisely. Imagine a situation where you're bombarded with information or faced with an overwhelming number of choices. That sense of being inundated can be captured by the word plethora.
So if I were to say, I have a plethora of emails to respond to, it would imply that I'm feeling a bit swamped by them, not necessarily excited about having a full inbox.
Exactly. It's about that tipping point where abundance starts to feel like excess. It's about that too much of a good thing feeling.
I'm starting to see how using plethora correctly can add a layer of sophistication to my descriptions. It's a much more nuanced way of expressing abundance than just saying a lot.
It's about choosing words that convey not just the quantity, but also the impact of that quantity.
This is making me realize how much I've taken these words for granted, what other advanced words are hiding in plain sight, waiting to be understood.
Let's delve into one that's often misused in discussions about facts and information.
Factoid.
Factoid. This one seems pretty straightforward. I always thought it just meant a small or trivial fact.
That's how it's commonly used, but its original meaning is a bit more nuanced, even controversial. The term factoid was actually coined to describe something that appears to be a fact, but is actually false or unsubstantiated.
Right, really? That's a completely different meaning.
That's the risk with using factoid in its original sense. It implies a degree of skepticism or even doubt about the validity of the information being presented. It can be a way of highlighting that something may sound like a fact, but it hasn't actually been proven true.
This is a perfect example of how language can evolve and shift in meaning over time. It's important to be aware of both the common usage and the original intent behind a word. You're absolutely right. Language is a living, breathing thing that constantly adapts and changes. Our goal is to be aware of those changes and use words in a way that is both accurate and effective.
So how can we use factoid in a way that doesn't accidentally spread misinformation?
If you're unsure of the accuracy of a piece of information, it's best to avoid using factoid altogether. You could say something like, here's an interesting tidbit, or this might be a bit of trivia, but this avoids any implication that the information might be false.
That's really helpful advice. Okay, bring on the next advanced word. I'm ready to conquer some more linguistic complexities.
Let's tackle a word that often causes confusion in discussions and debates. Moot.
Moot? I've always thought of this word as meaning irrelevant or pointless. Like that argument is moot because the decision has already been made.
That's a common understanding, but it's not entirely accurate. While moot can relate to something that's no longer relevant, its original meaning is a bit more nuanced. It originally referred to a matter that is open for debate or discussion.
So if a topic is moot, it's not necessarily pointless. It just means there's room for further discussion or consideration.
Precisely. Imagine a legal case where the circumstances change, making the original point of contention no longer relevant to the outcome. The issue might be considered moot, not because it was unimportant, but because it's no longer central to the case.
That's a really helpful clarification. So it's less about the topic being irrelevant and more about its significance having shifted or diminished.
Exactly. It's about acknowledging that the context has changed, and the original point of debate may no longer be the primary focus.
I'm definitely feeling more enlightened than moot after tackling that one. What other advanced word adventures await us?
Let's wrap up our exploration of advanced words with a pair that often trips people up: infer and imply.
Infer and imply, the classic conundrum. I know these words are related to drawing conclusions, but I often mix them up.
It's a common confusion. The key difference lies in who is doing the action. The speaker or writer implies something, meaning they suggest or hint at something without stating it directly. The listener or reader infers something, meaning they draw a conclusion based on what is implied.
So if I were to say, it's getting late, I might be implying that it's time to go, even though I haven't explicitly said so.
Exactly. And if you, as the listener, understood my implication, you would have correctly inferred my meaning.
I see. So it's a two-way street. The speaker sends out a subtle signal, and the listener picks up on that signal and draws a conclusion.
Precisely. It's like a subtle dance of communication where meaning is conveyed through suggestion and interpretation.
This distinction is so subtle, but it's crucial for clear communication. Misusing these words can lead to all sorts of misunderstandings.
Absolutely. Mastering the difference between infer and imply is essential for navigating conversations and interpreting written texts accurately. It's about understanding both sides of the communication equation.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. It's amazing how much depth and complexity there is to these seemingly simple words.
And we've only just scratched the surface. But I hope you're starting to see how understanding the nuances of language can empower you to communicate with greater clarity and precision.
I'm definitely feeling a lot more confident about using these words correctly. It's like a whole new world of linguistic possibilities has opened up.
And that's the beauty of language learning. It's an ongoing journey of discovery and refinement. Are you ready for a quick challenge to test your newfound knowledge?
Absolutely. Bring it on. All right. Hit me with that word challenge. I'm ready to put my knowledge to the test.
Okay. Let's see if you can recall the true meaning of nonplussed. Without looking back at our discussion, take a moment to think about it.
Okay. No peeking. I think I've got it. Nonplussed means to be surprised and confused, almost to the point of speechlessness. It's like that feeling of being completely thrown off guard and not knowing how to react.
That's absolutely correct. You've successfully decoded nonplussed. It seems our deep dive has truly expanded your vocabulary horizons.
I'm feeling pretty proud of myself right now. This whole experience has been eye-opening. I've realized that using words correctly isn't just about sounding smart. It's about communicating effectively and ensuring that my message is understood.
It's about wielding the power of language with precision and care. Choosing words that accurately reflect not only what we want to say, but also the subtle nuances of meaning we wish to convey.
You know, it's funny because I used to think that vocabulary was just about memorizing definitions. But this deep dive has shown me that it's so much more than that. It's about understanding the history, the etymology, the subtle shades of meaning that make each word unique.
It's about recognizing that words are not static, but dynamic. They evolve over time, their meanings shifting and adapting to reflect the changing world around us.
And that's what makes language so fascinating. It's a living, breathing entity that connects us to the past, informs our present, and shapes our future.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I encourage you to continue exploring the fascinating world of language. Pay attention to the words you use, the words you encounter, and the way they impact your understanding of the world.
I know I will. This has been such a rewarding journey. I'm walking away with a newfound appreciation for the power of words and the importance of using them correctly.
Remember, language is a gift, a tool that allows us to connect, create, and inspire. Let's use it wisely.
Absolutely.
Until next time.
Happy wordsmithing.